Hello and welcome to Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. I'm Becky Parker Geist and I'm your host. Audiobook Connection is your place to learn about the audiobook creative process in discussions between the authors, narrators, producers, and post-production teams that bring them all together, as well as guests who have listened to the audiobooks and have questions for the creative teams. This podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Audiobook Connection. I'm so glad you're with us today. I'm excited to have with me Steve Napolitan. Steve is an award-winning marketer. He is an international speaker and bestseller. His first book won number one in 4 countries and 14 categories, and he has made millions for his clients. One of the things that I think speaks so much and so clearly about who Steve is his tagline, choose gratitude, create freedom. Steve, thank you so much for being with me today.
It's my pleasure, Becky. I always enjoy having a conversation with you, so any day.
It's really fun. So I want to just kind of jump right in. You and your clients, myself included, have had some amazing success, and you've really been a great gift in my life. So first of all, thank you for that. We've been working together for a little over 3 years now, and this podcast is happening partly through your encouragement and then also through the ways in which you've helped guide my business so that it's been really growing.
And amazing to watch you.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
The thing is, I might have good ideas and I've learned a lot over the years, but it takes someone to go do it, right? It's like me giving you all the colors and the different paint, and you go make it. And really, I'm not even giving you the colors. You created all of that. I'm just giving you some techniques with the brush stroke,
Yeah.
But it really is, the two people together. It's a team. So it's been fun being a part of this with you and seeing your progress. So I'm as thankful as you are.
Yeah. Thank you. So I thought maybe one of the best ways to get started is to have you tell our listeners a little bit more about what you do and how you help your clients.
Well, it's a great question. And depending on where we go, it could be gigantic. Typically, we work with leaders, thought leaders, authors, C-level executives that have found success, but they don't have the life that they want. And what we do is we bring in business and marketing systems to have more business while we design their ideal life and have more life. So it's more business and more life at the same time without sacrificing. And most important for authors, this is a process to spend our time in the most efficient and wise way, so that we can get our messages out there in a bigger way and able to create more content. Because if you think about it, myself being an author as well, like when you create a book, then you have to go market it, all these things that we forget. And as a filmmaker, the same thing happened to me. You make a movie. I remember my first film and it got in the DVD box. And then you're there like, okay, great. My whole life in this little box or on these few pieces of paper. Then we forget we have to get it out there. Otherwise, we put all this effort into what? So the magic I have is about how do we produce these things in an efficient way so that we can have more business, have more readers, while we have the life that we want, which includes going and creating more content. Great.
And a lot of these leaders, of course, are authors. And so we're going to dive in a little deeper on some of that as well. Okay.
Which is absolutely true, because when you're the thought leader, and I encourage that. That's even why I encourage you to do your podcast. When you have information that helps others, why would you not get it out there? So absolutely. And also being a filmmaker myself, going back, that's how I started. I went from film into marketing and then started speaking and teaching from the awards we won. It's not just even nonfiction. I mean, the reality is entertainment is also very, very important part of relaxation and honoring ourselves. And it's part of the more life part. So, yes, absolutely. Yeah. Many of the people I work with are authors.
Yeah. So, and many of our listeners, of course, are authors. And so many of us are out there trying to learn how to have the largest reach, how to have the biggest impact. How can we really share our gifts with the world? You're an author, of course, and I know that you work with many authors. You also produce a lot of content that is related to your books. And I would love it if you would talk some about some of the strategies that you find most successful, both in that larger reach, getting that larger reach, and also having the impact. What are some of the things that you're doing?
Well, this one we might have to dissect in a bunch of different ways because there's so many layers to that. And there's so many ways to do it, because content goes from me speaking on stage, and not everyone that's an author wants to be a speaker. But I think everyone that's a speaker wants to be an author. So, I think, maybe not, but most speakers I know, if you're out there, so that's one thing. If you're already speaking and teaching, if you're a trainer in front of the room and you don't have a book yet, that is transformational, because I did start speaking first and then became an author. And I actually launched my book on a day of one of my speaking engagements. And then I sold a copy to everyone in the audience. And that's what helped me hit as a #1 bestseller, because I strategically launched my book on a day that I was speaking. So just one thing there. The overall reaching our audience kind of comes back to some very core marketing principles. If we have to really look, and many of us, including myself, over the years when I first started, we overlook that idea of the target audience. And I try to transcend that. And I think I have with what I call wow clients. And so we have to really put ourselves into who does this, as an author, if you're listening right now, where does your book best serve? And some of us might think, oh, everyone, it's everyone. And that might be the case. Maybe this, and like I'm in that world, because as far as marketing goes, I'm not so much a niche. I work with core marketing principles. So it really works for many businesses, and you can get yourself in trouble with that. And so what I even had to do was pick narrower markets, right? So even though I can touch many, and you may expand to that, but if you can find a space that you can saturate first, because it's kind of building momentum, and that can be geographic. Maybe you start in your local city. You need to get to a saturation point that then you can build up. And I'm trying to get this into like a more specific. So I guess, the first tactic is to really address, who do you want to be in front of? That's important. It cannot be overlooked, because you could come up with all kinds of social media tactics or ads and all these things, but then who?
Right.
Who are we in front of?
Right. Because when you're talking about saturating that target market, I mean, sometimes if we think like geographical, that can often come from around, let's say, where your story it takes place. Or it could be a travel guide to a particular area, where geographic location could be a key element.
Yeah.
And I can see how, that would definitely impact what you choose, the ways you choose to market.
It changes everything, because then when you know that, where, right? So that can get you somewhere, but then also how to speak to them, because this is the thing. And here we're talking about authors, to authors, words matter. They really do, even more in marketing. We have to meet them where they are, and we have to say the right words. And so one thing that I think, as a creative and having gone to film school, it actually became a disadvantage in some ways. I had to overcome my own creativity, because I would think inside my own bubble, and I would say, oh, this is going to be amazing. And then I'd like share it, and no one would buy, or no one would want to watch. And I'm like, what happened? And from a marketing standpoint, I had to realize that I can have awesomeness inside a box, but if I don't wrap it with the right information or the right words, they're not even going to open the present, right? So I've had to learn a simple marketing principle, and that is, whatever amazingness you have inside your box, which would be your book, or if you have other offerings that your book leads to, we really have to figure out what are the words that are going to attract them to open the box. And it might be different. And a lot of times it is. I would say, I would go to the 3/4 mark. I would say like 2/3 to 3/4 of our engagement comes from different words than what's going to get someone to actually read the whole book. Does that make sense? It's totally
Yeah.
different thing that's going to track them, that's going to get them to digest all the content.
Right, right. For example, you could use the word, let's say you define your your book in the genre of mystery thriller, but thriller connotes something very different and like really graphically violent to one person, where maybe it's not. Maybe it's very much more like spiritually based, but it has high action. So just that use of the word thriller in a way, and just in thinking about how authors are communicating with their potential audience,
Right.
like really identifying what are your people, who are they, and what are they looking for, touches in on the question of keywords. And it
Yeah.
sounds like that's partly what you're talking
Well,
about.
and that is, and you were even asking when you first asked the question, like all the different types of content. So when I take, my first book, Capture Clients, Close Deals, which even talking about words, I want to rename that book, and I probably will have a newer rendition, because now this has been so many years now where and I guess it wasn't that many. I mean, that book hit #1 in 2016. So that's what, 6 years ago from the time they were recording now, about
5 years.
yeah, 5 years. Yeah. So, but even things change, but I wanted alliteration. That's a marketing thing. So it's all the C's, right? Capture clients. And so I went up that, but I don't like the word capture so much, but it did catch people's attention, and it did its job. And so even though I personally didn't like the title, it actually still caught people's attention, and it allowed us to hit, as a #1 bestseller. And I still have people telling me, I just got a message a week ago. Someone said, I read your book for the second time, and it's so changed my life and the way that I gain clients. I'm much more aligned with the subheading, which is gain clients without convincing or chasing, which goes back into that. But so to the content, why I brought this up is that there are pieces of that book that are in some of my social media content in smaller pieces. And then I haven't done this yet. So this is even something that I want to do to further my search engine optimization. Because I am nonfiction and I am a trainer, I want to lead people to my trainings. And so another place in the middle between my book and between social media would be some longer articles. Maybe it takes one of the chapters of the book and reconfigures it a little bit. So there's a little bit more content, because what Google's looking for, and I know this is going to get technical for a second, but it's not too technical. They're looking for time as well as relevancy. So, and they judge relevancy by how long they see you, people staying on your website. So for instance, if I catch someone's attention on a Google search, and then they click and they end up on my website and they watch like a short video, and then they were to click and read an article, and then they were to click to go look at my book, and then they buy. Now I've extended that journey with that particular person, and Google watches all of that. Go figure. And then they notice, oh, wow, this must be more relevant, judged based on how much time they spend. And so if you can get your audience to spend more time with you, that will lift you up. So whatever your topic is, and going back to keywords, if people are searching for those, then you're going to come up more relevant in organic search, which is what we all want from marketing, because that's unpaid search. Now, unpaid with quotations around that, because you paid all this time and whatever else money to get relevant. That makes sense. I don't know if I'm going in the direction that you want, but there's more to it, but I'll stop myself. But this is where you have to start thinking.
Yeah, well, you've touched on some things. We're sort of dancing around the edges of the client value journey. So I want to kind of dive into that a little bit more. And for some authors, they're thinking about how their book, how their content fits in with their big picture of what their biggest goal is, right? And it's really exciting when I have somebody come to us for their audiobook production, and they already know, oh yeah, this is exactly how it fits in. This is what we're doing. This is where we want them to go. These are the calls to action. And, great. It's the kind of thinking that I'm encouraging our authors to, and listeners of this podcast, to really put some thought into. Now, for many of our fiction authors, it feels like it's more of a challenge to come up with that kind of, to kind of think in that world. And so I was wondering if you might, first, I know you have a program that helps clients understand how to develop a client value journey. If you could talk a little bit about kind of what that even means, right?
Yes.
And then, anything else to sort of help us understand, help our authors understand why they should be thinking about that.
And this is another big topic, but let's see how we can dissect it into little pieces. So the first thing to kind of put a representation on is many of us, when we want a customer, and let's just face it, even if you don't think of yourself as a retailer or a seller, you're selling a book, you're selling content, whether it's to entertain or to teach or somewhere in the middle. We're getting someone to want enough to open up their pocketbooks and buy something from us. And a client value journey is just a way, if you want to picture it, think of it as a staircase. It's building steps. So I find so many times when people get into business, and this can be on entertainment, because I've been in the entertainment business, all the way to selling a widget or selling services. And we tend to be up in the penthouse. Just imagine that. So you're in the building, you're in the penthouse, and you're yelling down, "Hey, get my book," or "get my thing," or whatever it is. And then people are looking around. There's no elevator. There's no stairs. They're like, "What the heck?" And oh, there's a jetpack in the bush right there. Just put that on. Most people make it up here. We've had a few situations, but just stay straight when you push the button. And and we're asking people to make this huge leap, and it might not be money. Some of you as authors might think, "Oh, well, what are you talking about? It's not expensive." Like let's say you have expensive consulting services, or someone's buying a car or buying a house. I mean, these things are really big and it can feel like you're jumping to the penthouse. But all of us need to think about the staircase. All of us need to make it easier for our audience to engage with us. And that's what the client value journey is to me, is how do you start? How do you get them to engage? And then how do you get them to take the next couple steps and the next couple steps? And in a client value journey, for some folks, the first step is the book. There are people that give their book away. They just give it away, like, here, free. Or you'll see it all the time, pay for shipping and handling. Or you'll see speakers like myself, they just give their book to everyone in the audience. And because that is their first step. And some of you might be, that's your thing. The book is your last step. And so you have to think of what is going to get them to engage in your audience, to be one of your audience members, to invest in your characters. Let's say that it is fiction. Do you have a Harry Potter series on you and you're about to get people to dive into a whole world? Do you have your own character universe? Are they going to start to come in? How can we spark their attention to this universe and start getting them to read the books? Or if you're going to have a video, accompaniment, or are you going to have a podcast? Some fiction authors are starting to share their stories episodically on podcasts. I mean, actually, what am I saying? Starting. This has been going on for a long time. But what ways are you going to capture your audience? And what's the first step? So that's ultimately, without going much further, ultimately, You're saying, what are the steps for the journey of your audience? You can say audience, your customers, and where does your book play into that? Is it on the third step? Is it on the last step? And this takes some doing, because everyone's journey is going to be different.
Right.
Does that help?
Yeah. So I want to just sort of summarize a couple of things, these points so far. So first is about understanding who your target market is. Who are your readers or listeners of your audiobook? And what kinds of words are they using? And you also want to understand, like, what is this path? Because, what is this path that you would like to walk with them on? And where is your book in that process is a part of this figuring out. And I think for many listeners, many authors that we work with, certainly they're not yet thinking about that bigger picture, that ongoing engagement. And yet they may even have, let's say, like a book series. I love your example of the Harry Potter series. You were really, J.K. Rowling has created an entire empire around those characters. And, many, many authors are writing series. They're writing these, creating these whole worlds. Whether it becomes as big as Harry Potter is irrelevant. But what is the journey? How do we begin to engage? And then where do we go from there? Right.
And how many maybe they're not super mainstream, but you have, and I see with my kids all the time, because they're in a place where we have on-demand content everywhere, and they'll fall into a little niche, but it's not little. Then I look and it's like 8 million, 10 million people, but nobody knows about it. And they'll find this little piece of content that has like a series around it, or it's their life. Some reality shows on YouTube now. I mean, like anybody could be a reality superstar by just putting the camera on them. Now there's a lot out there, but it happens all of a sudden. Poof, there's a tipping point. Like Malcolm Gladwell's book is brilliant, right? Like The Tipping Point. And that is the fact that like anyone can get there. And do you need to? Like, then it goes back to what you're saying, Becky, like, what are your end goals? But there's so many stories that create a universe, and maybe you're not going to be George Lucas with the Star Wars, or, or having Harry Potter, or you have Lord of the Rings. Those are gigantic followings around a character base, but you could be quite successful with a few million hardcore fans that love your characters, and it may hit a tipping point, and maybe you will go really big. I mean, dream as big as you want. The thing goes back to what we started, like, at the beginning of this conversation. Where is your first audience? Another brilliant marketer, Seth Godin, he calls them sneezers, is what he used to use that term. I don't know if he still does. This is many years ago, but he would say, who are the people you're going to get to go? Actually, thinking about it in this day, we don't want to talk about this. He brought marketing to a virus, and we don't want that. But I mean, we can all think how, I guess it is relevant in our current society right now. Like, when you sneeze, you think of a virus passing on. How can you get someone to talk about you, is all he was saying. Can you spark enough attention? Because as a marketer, any marketer could tell you need to spend this money on ads, you need to do this and that. And I would say the reality is, as a marketer myself, the number one thing I'm trying to gain is people talking about whatever we're doing. So getting raving fans, getting referrals, getting people talking about you. And that's why me, Becky, I'm so much about wow clients, wow customers, wow audience. Who are your top, the cream of the crop, the best audience for you? Even if it's smaller, I would say put all your attention on them and give them a journey. So going back to that client value journey, give them a journey that they would want. And the reason value's in there is because when the value ends, the journey ends.
Yeah.
And then it'll grow. Because they'll start talking about it, and they'll tell their friends. And then lo and behold, all of a sudden you have this bigger audience.
Let's pause for a moment. We'll be right back.
Looking for a way to get some direction and help with building your author platform and marketing your books and audiobooks? Pro Audio Voices created the audiobook marketing program to help authors like yourself get the support they need at an affordable rate. We work with you to bring your goals together with our marketing expertise to create a customized blueprint, the tools and materials to build your platform, step-by-step instructions, and the team to help you all along the way. For more information, visit proaudiovoices.com and click on Audiobook Marketing Program. Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing.
I know that part of the content that you put out is your podcast. So would you tell us a little bit sort of generally about your podcast, the name of the show, frequency, that sort of thing, just to get us started?
Yeah, it's More Business, More Life is the podcast. Go figure, right? That's my trademark. And that's also an important thing for those of you that are on the nonfiction side training. we want those words, if we're building it up, to be in those places. So More Business, More Life for me is a program that I actually offer. It's a 6-month experience, and then people can stay with us, and it's a whole community. But then they can also watch my shows. So I actually have on video shows, which have gone down, and it's talking about frequency. I've been able to shift. And so, during 2020, was actually when we started the podcast. For years, people would tell me, do a podcast, Steve, do a podcast. And I'm such a filmmaker, right? I did everything on video. And so I'm happy to say, like, I'm in love with podcasting now. It's so awesome. And to just have people listening is just amazing. So we shoot for a weekly show. And I say that because just the beginning of 2021, depending on when you're listening to this, we did go bi-weekly for a period. It's going to end and we're going to get back to weekly. But I needed to give myself that space to build some new things that we needed to do. But I didn't want to go to zero. I do believe in consistency. And I might take a slight hit, by the way, on this because I'm not there every week. But I do plan on weekly. There's something about enough. But as far as consistency goes, I think it is being consistent is more important than actually your quantity. It's quality is what I always want to do. And if I'm going to forsake my quality to have more shows, I think you're going to lose your audience. So I would say do what works for you. And then if you make it awesome enough, there are shows that I know of, and I've even watched, again, bring it back to my kids, where there's only one a month, but it's so awesome. Everyone's waiting for that next one to come out. So that's that. And on the show, we basically talk about a broad spectrum because it's about more business and more life. I tend to talk to leaders, again, people that have found a way to create abundance, to be able to have the situation that meets their living criteria, and they're able to have that life that they want. Because many of us, and I was there too, I thought, I'm going to go make money and then I'll have the life I want. And then you build, and then I couldn't get off the treadmill. Like literally, right. I'm like running and I'm sick. And so now that's what the whole show's about. So how do we live better? So sometimes my last interview I did all around almond butter and like how it should be processed and how we should eat it. But it was also a twist because I'm interviewing the founder of that business and he fell in love with this food that feeds and nourishes our body. And he's able to make $1 million, doing what he loves, that he's super passionate about almonds. Go figure. And then he's making $1 million business and he has a 10-month-old. That podcast is coming soon. So it should be out next month. So that's what it's about. Stories like that, where we're sharing, like, here's a father that's also creating a business that's also doing what he's absolutely in love with.
So you're interviewing people on the podcast.
Yes.
And then would you share with our listeners how that can be especially beneficial in terms of helping get the word out about possibilities, and also what your mission is in the world?
Well, thank you. And Becky's been a guest on my show, so you can go watch that. We can put that in the show notes. We'll swap each other's
we'll
podcast. and the thing about that is that when you get on someone else's podcast, like right now, Becky knows people that I don't know. People are listening to this podcast that have never heard of me. And now we have the opportunity. So, as an author, you want to go out and get on other people's podcasts. This is one of the things I always teach is called singing in the shower. Many people, when it comes to social media, or even their own audience, you're on your own website, you're on your own social media page, and you're wondering why you don't have more followers every month. And the reason that is because you're not actually using the networking part of the social network. You've got to go out. You've got to get on other people's spaces. Yeah. And then if you have a show, let's say you take your book and you create a podcast and then you bring people on. Now, Becky, do you think I'm going to share this podcast? Absolutely. Here, I was on another podcast. Here I am. And then now people that are in my audience are going to go check out what Becky's doing.
Right.
So it definitely does that. And this comes back to my mission. My mission is to help as many people have the freedom they desire. That's it. plain and simple. It's creating that. And the way that I'm focused on my goal right now is that we want to help 1,000 businesses in the next 3 years work less than 40 hours a week, have more revenue than ever before. In fact, we've been having our clients break revenue goals, which is awesome. And then everyone in the company working less, everyone getting paid more, and everyone taking more vacations. And we've actually done this now with dozens of companies. And that's why I want to take it to 1,000. And it's like almost like an oxymoron, because you feel like, oh, I'm going to work less and make more. Are you ridiculous, Steve? But it actually happens. And this is the best metaphor. It's like a power drill that's battery operated, and you're working your normal day. Let's say you're putting most people are doing like 10 plus hours a day, and you're drilling away, and you have 10 more holes to drill, and you're at the end of your battery life, and you only have one battery, and you got to go charge it. And are you going to stay there? And the drill's like, and it's not even going through it. Are you going to finish those 10 holes and it's going to take you like 4 hours? Or do you just call it a day, go plug in that drill, go home, come back tomorrow morning and drill those 10 holes in less than a minute? And, it sounds ridiculous. And it's like, duh, of course, Steve, we're going to plug that in. But why do we not? I was in that club. It's not as a club. Right? It's not as a parent, right? We forget we are a battery.
Yeah.
We forget that, Becky, we are a battery ourselves too, and we need to recharge. And I would argue that, when you rest, we as humans, and definitely in the United States, but we're not the only country, many other places in the world that I've been able to speak and train now as I've gone more international, we're not the only ones. Like, people are forgetting to recover, to recharge, to take time. And when we actually do, productivity goes up. So it's the opposite of what you would think. If you actually work less, you're going to be smarter. You're going to make better decisions. Just as an example, I had one CEO in the last couple of years that I worked with. And the first thing we did was got his to-do list to a manageable place, because that's another thing. We put everything on our to-do list. We think we're going to do it all. We got it manageable, started taking time off. And he had come back from a vacation in Italy. So you can tell this is before COVID. So he's coming back, and I said, how's it going? He's like, it's amazing. I'm making better decisions. Our revenue's up. I feel so rested, like all these things. And then I said, oh, this is beautiful. I said, what if everyone in your company felt this way? And then it hit him. He's like, it's not just us at the top that get these privileges. If we actually let all of our employees rest, take more time off, then we're going to have a better productivity.
I want to build on something you're saying. So on the fun piece and sort of tying back to the podcasting and interviews and getting on other people's interviews. And if that makes you uncomfortable or nervous, because many authors are used to spending a lot of time alone, and that's kind of their safe space. But imagine, let's just say, as an example, imagine that you're a science fiction writer, right? And you start a podcast about science fiction where all you're doing is interviewing other science fiction authors. Well, first of all, like going back to what you had said, Steve, about sharing, they're all going to want to share that. And science fiction readers are always looking for, just as in any genre, but they're always looking for the next great read or listen in an audiobook. So, and then on that, something you said earlier about team, is that it takes a team, right? And we just had a recent episode about this very thing. It's like, figure out who your team is. What are the pieces you want to do? And what are the pieces you want to delegate? And I know you're really big on delegation. Why don't you give us your 3-word reminder, sort of that mantra of what we should be thinking about each day in terms of the kinds of tasks on our to-do list?
Yeah. So coming to that to-do list, it's really important that we do what we do best. And I think you touched on a couple things, and I have 3 criteria of what I start to get off my plate. But I also want to, if I can go back 1 second on that whole science fiction idea, it's a brilliant idea, because think about if you interview other science fiction authors and then people start that they love that author. Now they get to know you and they get to have more access to more content. What a brilliant idea. And for anyone that's got fear loaded up about being in presence of others, even my speaking coach to this day, and he's been on stage with Sir Richard Branson, presidents of the United States, all kinds of things. He still gets big time nerves, and he's more of an introvert. And you would think that all speakers are extroverts. They're not, so I want to give two quick words on that. You got to have an intention. So what is your intention? And if that is to reach more audience members in the science fiction genre, then okay, we have an intention. And then put your attention on the audience instead of on yourself. We get stuck when we put all the attention on ourselves. Like, what am I going to say? And you know what? I will almost promise that your audience will love you more when you're real. When you're like, I'm freaked out. I'm doing a podcast. I hate this. I'm the writer that's sitting back there. And, by myself, say all that out loud, get it out in the open, just say it out loud and then say, I'm just here, and they're going to love you more. Cause guess what? They probably are introvert. They're probably sitting at home freaked out, and you might inspire them to get out there and do something. And so intention and attention and do it. And then bringing back to how do we get stuff done? Because obviously that's a big part of our life, right? Like, how do we get our books? How do we get our books done? How do we get this done? It's best. I believe in strength finders, there's a whole thing that Gallup puts out where you can find your 5 strengths. And I think it's, you have to pay like 20 or 30 bucks and you can test yourself. And I'm not affiliated with any of that, but if you want to do it, you can. But the idea is, and I believe in this, you could spend a lifetime trying to get good at your weaknesses, your whole lifetime, or you could take your strengths and go do all kinds of amazing things in the world. And I think we're all made differently. Every human being on this planet is slightly different. We're all unique, and yet we all have many similarities as well. But your unique parts are what makes you the genius that you are in what you do best. And in fact, that goes back to my freedom thing, Becky. It's like, what I want to see is people's geniuses, that they're doing it. The worst thing for me is to have someone that's an amazing author, let's say, and they're doing that on the side as a hobby, and they're making you could be a hobbit if you want to, but but you're there as a hobby and you're doing something else to make money because you think that's the only thing you can do. I would rather see you, if your genius is writing, I would want to see you writing full time and creating that abundance. And in order to do that, it comes back to what you said. We need a team, because maybe we're terrible at marketing. Maybe we don't know how to make an audiobook. And that's why everyone should call, Pro-Voices, and talk to Becky, because you can find other people that are geniuses at those things that you're not. And so when I look at my to-do list, going back to this list and your question, Becky, is then I say 3 things to myself. What can I eliminate? And this one is sometimes tricky for people. They're like, what do you mean eliminate? I wouldn't have put it on the list if I didn't need to do it. But it actually is a great question. Do you really need to do it? And there are things that I've put on my list that maybe I don't. And maybe it's a pause. Maybe it's not a full elimination, but maybe it's something like wash the car. Do I really need to wash my car today? There were times when I was going into business engagements and someone was going to see me in my car that I would actually want it to be clean, but then sometimes it's that my own mindset, like, who cares if my car is clean or not? Maybe it does matter. Maybe it does. If you're going to do a car show, maybe that does matter. So you have to use your own discretion. So eliminates the first one. Second one is delegate. And you don't have to have employees to delegate. You can get service providers. You can use Fiverr.com and find people to do little tasks for you. There's so many. We're in a global workforce now. And with all the folks, especially in the last year, that have transitioned or lost their jobs, there are so many people looking for a little bit of work here and a little bit of work there. It's amazing the team that you can put together. And then the third one is automate. What can be automated? And some of these things we're talking about is in marketing, like, how can emails automatically go out to my audience? How can we devise things that can be on an automatic? Even just simple things like your own calendar. If I'm going to book meetings, I use Acuity. Now they have Calendly, all of them. A lot of them are very similar and they all work really great, but no longer do you have to have an assistant or even yourself going back and forth, say, can you meet at 2? No, I can't do 2. How about
Right.
3 tomorrow? And we're wasting all this time when for free, some of these are free apps, and some we pay a little bit now because we get extra little bells and whistles, but it's not much. It's definitely cheaper than losing all the time. But now I can send a link to my calendar and someone can book themselves.
Right. Yep.
That's automation right now. And even if you're out there and you have an assistant, you're wasting your money paying them to help you book meetings when your assistant can be sending the link out.
Indeed. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's gigantic.
It
what
is.
We're talking
There's so
about
many.
here.
We're like talking huge concepts in just like little snippets. But I think that, part of my goal with this podcast is to open up some doors, open up some windows, and give people some ideas of the possibilities of rethinking, sort of retuning the way that they're approaching their process. Because, like I said, my own experience in learning some of these ways of doing business, ways of living my life have been so extraordinary in terms of my results. Like you, Steve, I was working every day, sun up to sundown and beyond, so like from the moment I got up till I couldn't function any longer. I was doing that power drill thing, and I'd take the drill bit out and I'd be turning it by hand to try to, get the job done. It's just not that way anymore. I'm really so much more living my life. I have time now that I'm working consistently on my own novel. Just, huge changes. So again, just this is, I think, a sampler kind of to give people some ideas on new ways to approach things.
It really is. And they're simple.
Yeah.
Just do one at a time.
Right.
And just to cap on that on simplicity, just pick one thing to delegate or one thing to eliminate or one thing to automate. Just start there. If you can get one thing off your plate, just allow that to be better and then come back. And so it's an ongoing process. I'm still asking myself those 3 questions because you might do something for a year thinking there's no way anyone else can possibly do this. It has to be me. And then a year from now, you'll finally say, oh, you know what? It doesn't have to be me anymore.
Yep.
It'll just pop in your head.
Yep. I have definitely had that experience myself, And it's also like when you have somebody that you start working with, and then over time they get better and better at what they're doing, and then they're ready for that delegation as well.
It's so beautiful.
I want to just cycle back for a minute to talking about the podcast. How, in terms of your client value journey, where does your podcast fit into that? And sort of like another way to answer that question might be like, what is your goal for your podcast?
I would say one main word, or I guess it's two main words: awareness and continuity. So, and I'll dig a little bit to make an understanding of that. So I'm using it to spark awareness, to get to new people. Or if somebody sees me speak, but they're not ready to work with us, they tend to go like, I just had my first speaking engagement in over a year with a hybrid stage. We, there was a small amount of group in the room and then the rest was on stage, but, people came up and they're like, I just subscribed to your podcast, so just from a speaking engagement, and now they're listening,
right?
And one woman, I just have to say, she's like, look, and I was like, what? Yeah, those are my shows. She's like, no explicit. I'm like, yeah, we don't have, there might be one show, someone might have said a bad word or something. She's like, I know so many coaches and speakers now, it's all explicit. And she's like, so it was just a funny moment. I know it's total random digression, but that right there off the stage, she's showing me her phone and I'm like, yeah, I know that's my podcast.
Yeah.
But now I have a new listener and it's beautiful. And now they're going to engage because especially if you're out there and you're a coach, consultant, or trainer, not everyone's going to want to work with you right away. It's kind of like dating, right? Like you're not going to see someone and then get married. Most people don't. I've heard some stories, but most of us date and you get to know someone and those things. So then that helps there. So that's the awareness side. The second part is the continuity. Now we have clients. So who are probably our biggest group of listeners? clients and past clients that want to stay in our community. They've already worked with us and now they want to keep hearing what Steve has to say or who he's interviewing next. And so we're giving more value to our audience so they stay. Remember I said, when the value stops, the journey stops. So we're bringing, more things. And we just did a webcast about a week ago. I do about a month, every month I'll do one live webcast where anyone publicly can come ask me questions and be there. And a woman there signed up for one of our courses. And at the end of the webcast, she said, I've been watching your show for over 3 years. So from the show to the podcast, she's been watching and watching. I never had met her, finally got to meet her. And now she's in one of our programs. And those are the things. It's like on drip, so I can't remember where she said she saw me. She saw me speak somewhere. And for 3 years, she watched my show and listened to the show. And then now she's a client.
Yeah. And
it doesn't always take that long.
Right. And I obviously know the answer to this question, but I want to. So you obviously, from your experience as a film producer, director, you have all the technical skills. You could be doing all the things to produce your own podcast, right? Do you?
No, absolutely not. In fact, and this is, I don't think you were looking for a plug on this, but it is. But, Becky, you and your team are amazing. And, Pro Audio Voices produces my show. And this goes beyond just our podcast, even my television show. I hire a full crew now. And I will tell you, I didn't do that at the very beginning because Becky's right. So my first videos that I produced, I set up the camera, I set up the lights, I set up the microphone. And then when I got ready to do the production, I wasn't into it. My energy was low. And if you hear me now, I'm like full of energy and I don't drink caffeine. I just have, because where I am with my life, I just have this natural thing. And that didn't show up, Becky. It didn't show up on camera because I was doing too many things. And there's a simple saying that I live by, where your focus goes, energy flows. And when I was working on all the production elements, I sacrificed the most important part, the content.
Right.
Now I wasn't showing up as, just imagine if you're the actor, and I give a lot of credit to some of the people we know, like Clint Eastwood, and even Ron Howard's done it a couple times. Some of these actors that have directed and act in the film,
right.
Full kudos. Oh my, because I've tried to do that. The reason I got into producing is because when I was in film school and I was directing, I couldn't find someone to properly produce my film, like all the management. So I started producing and directing, and that was a nightmare. Then my content suffered. So I learned this even in film school. I gave it up. I found I was easier for me to find really good directors than to find really good producers, like someone to make it happen. So I became the make it happen guy. And I have more credits under producing and executive producing than directing. I enjoy directing. I love doing that. And now I'm talent.
Right.
Now I need to show up and I need to be the performer. I need to come and have the experience. And you can't do that if you try to do it all. Now I have to preface this whole thing. If that's what you need to do to start, then I'm totally for it. Because you know what? If you don't have the budget to hire someone, then I'd rather see you making something, but try to make it simple and try to, maybe set it and forget it. If you can have your whole setup and then leave and then tomorrow you just come full in, then that's awesome. A lot of us don't have that opportunity. And I would really say, find the budget if you can, because having a team, you're going to have a more professional show. You're going to focus on the content. And ultimately, you'll probably grow your audience a lot quicker because you'll be able to produce more content. Imagine what I was just saying. If you have to set it all up one day and then you have to shoot it and then you got to edit it. What if it takes you 2 weeks to produce one show? If you have a team and you could produce 20 shows because you're only doing the performance part and someone else in the background is doing the rest. Those are just a couple bullets, but it's so much nicer to be pampered. Really, that's what it is. But it's not just to be pampered. It's not to be hoity-toity. It actually affects the performance. I guarantee anyone that if they were making a one-man film or one-woman film, whatever you want to say, that if you're doing everything, chances are it's going to take you either a really long time or the content is going to suffer.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
do you have a recommendation for authors who would like to start figuring out their client value journey for their own customers, and using their content? Where might someone begin?
Well, I think the first thing is really simple but profound. You've got to start with your audience. That's why at the very beginning of this podcast, I talked about who is your wow audience? Who are your wow clients or customers? And what do they need? What do they want and what do they need? And those are two different things. So you've got to really and these are things, by the way, I'll give you an answer that people can take away right now, but also these are things that I teach. So I have a whole More Business, More Life program, as I mentioned. And if folks go to the website, and also there's some free gifts. We have a Clear Path to Customer that's on our website that's free. And then I also have another product called Survey to Success, which is also free. And anyone that's listening to this can text message survey, and you just text the word survey and it'll prompt you. You have to hit yes to say that you really want it. And that's text message laws and stuff. But then you can get this free thing. And what it does is it allows you to dissect who your wow audience is and what are they saying, because that's what's most important. As an example, I was working with a chiropractor and he thought pain relief was the most valuable thing. So everything, now think as a marketer for a second, everything is going to be pain relief, right? And this is what we see, right? Many chiropractors, massage therapists, they're out there, acupuncturists, we're solving a pain problem. When we started asking questions of this particular chiropractor, what came back from his patients was on-time appointments.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, where's this come out of nowhere? But then come to find out, that doctor, he hated waiting like many of us do. We wait in the patient room, or we wait in the waiting room, and then we wait in the patient room, and we're like 45 minutes from the time of our appointment. He didn't like that. So it turns out he was running about 65% on time, as close to on time as possible, which is remarkable. And that's why it was coming up on the surveys. And so then we kept asking questions. And what we did is we created a program where it was all on time. We said, what if every appointment was on time? And that meant that the patients had to be included in it. So we asked the patients, hey, your appointment's at 9:30. How would you like to see the doctor right at 9:30? And then people said, absolutely. We're like, great. We just need one thing from you. And they're like, what's that? We need you to be on time.
Right.
We need you to show up on time. So we're proposing a new rule. If you're 5 minutes or more late, your appointment's canceled. If you know you're going to be late, call ahead. We're going to save an hour every day to move people's appointments. So if you show up at 9:37, you'll be turned away. Just call us if you know you're going to be late and we'll reschedule you. Is that okay with you? So it's still continuing the survey. And then most people said yes. Some people left. They're like, no, I can't do that. I'll never be on time. So they had to go somewhere else to get there because they kept getting their appointments canceled. But it was a small fraction. He tripled his business. We started saying the right words. And this is the most important thing, Becky. Whenever we're looking for an audience, any audience, we have to find our wow audience the best that we can. There's obviously refinement as time goes on, but we need to ask them what they want, give them what they want, then teach them what they need. Now, let's bring this into context with the chiropractor. What they wanted was on-time appointments. What they needed was pain relief. If he was a terrible chiropractor, it doesn't matter how on time the appointment is,
Right.
We're not going to be there. So just imagine your book. If the book is blank pages, it's an empty book. You could be a great marketer and you could get people to buy your book, but then nothing's going to happen after that. We're going to lose them. And pretty soon everyone's going to get wise to this. And there's going to be a whole bunch of reviews that the book is empty. It was a cover. It's a hoax. All those things go. So we have to meet them where they are. So that's the most important first step. Really identifying who our audience is the best we can, finding out what they want, not what they need. This is where we get confused as marketers that, we could be saying pain relief, pain relief, pain relief, but that wasn't grabbing folks' attention. It does some, it's not a zero. But when we said on-time appointments. Then every time they answered the phone, it was home of the on-time appointment. All of the things were on-time appointment. And I've done this with many, many businesses. We changed. It goes back to the metaphor I used at the beginning of this podcast. You've got to find the wrapper for your box. You could have the best content in your book, but what does your cover look like, right? It does matter.
Yeah. I want to give our listeners a direct link to that Clear Path to Customers, because I know that that's a really wonderful free gift that you offer. And you can find that if you go to bit.ly, so that's bit.ly/ all capitals now, AC, that's like for audiobook connection, _ CPC, that's for Clear Path to Customers.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And that's the best one. If you're choosing between what I said to text message, and I'm so glad you have that link, Becky, then get this. ClearPath to Customer is our upgraded version of that. So it's perfect. They'll both be of service to you, but this one is the newest super duper one.
Yeah.
So perfect, Becky.
All right.
Yeah.
And then this last question is I think is going to be a one-word answer. So is there a best time to get started?
I always say now for sure. Because I guess started with anything. What are you saying? Just like started with their book, their career, or podcasting, or anything?
Oh, a good question back. Yeah, I was thinking in terms of like getting started on this process of figuring out, what their client value journey is and taking steps forward.
Absolutely. Then that's a for sure now. Because when you start dissecting what the first step is, second step, third step, it actually, let's say you have multiple books in you. You might be thinking that you're working on one, but that happened to me. The first book that I wrote was not the first book I thought I was going to write. But because I started looking at my client value journey, I did what made sense. And it's now resulted in millions of revenue. No joke, literally, because I made that choice. And that other book is still going to happen, but it wasn't the first book. So knowing the journey now as quickly as you can, then you'll actually pick the order of what's going to allow you to be most successful.
Steve, thank you so much for spending this time with me. We need to wrap up. But again, this is Steve Napolitan. And just thank you, thank you, thank you.
It's my pleasure, Becky. As always, anytime I'm here. It's been a beautiful experience.
Thanks for joining us for Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. Please take a moment to subscribe at audiobookconnection.com. The podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Learn more at proaudiovoices.com. Again, thanks for being with us, and please join us next week.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.